moldy bathrooms, stained bedding, old food in the cupboard. These are just a few of the treasures that we've discovered in our Airbnbs.
We've stayed in over 20 Airbnbs since we started traveling full-time, and we're still surprised by what we find when we arrive at a new one.
So when you guys see our videos, you get the beauty shots of the Airbnbs. We love showing off all the places we stay in, and some of them really are quite spectacular.
But there's another side to living in Airbnbs. You're typically renting from another individual, not a professional business, so you're surrounded by their furnishings and their taste and their idea of cleanliness, and often that's very different from your own.
That's right. So in this video, we're providing a reality check of what it's like to live full-time in Airbnbs. We know that so many of you want to travel, whether it's short trips or maybe full-time the way that we do it. And on the surface, our life of travel might seem a little glamorous.
Or at least we hope to make it look glamorous.
Yeah, we're always very selective about how we present the places we're staying in. So when we're shooting, we tidy up, we catch the best light, we showcase all the best features.
But behind the scenes, it can be a very different story. So this video is going to help you decide whether Airbnbs are a good option for you. But first, hello from our latest Airbnb here in Toronto. Now, if you're new around here, I'm Gillian and this is Stephanie. We retired early to travel full time, so if you're looking for more adventure, you can subscribe for a new video every Sunday.
We've received a lot of comments from you guys in our community. You love the idea of slow travel, but you're just not sure if you can hack living in Airbnbs full time. And we get it. We used to be regular people who lived in our own home with all our own furnishings. And when we traveled, we'd like to stay in charming little boutique hotels.
Now, when we decided to travel full-time, we knew that our old way of travel just wasn't going to work. It wouldn't be affordable to stay in boutique hotels for months at a time. But we also knew that hostels weren't going to be good for our marriage. House sitting is an option for some long-term travelers, but we have 2 dogs of our own and we couldn't really look after someone else's pets as well. So that left Airbnbs as the obvious choice.
Now, it's one thing to stay in an Airbnb for a night or two as part of a holiday. We would be there to see the city and try some local food. So at the most, maybe we would cook breakfast in the Airbnb. This is very different from living in an Airbnb for a whole month, especially if the space is less than ideal or even worse.
So when we were planning our big adventure, we did sometimes wonder, was this really going to be a lifestyle that we'd enjoy? We'd have someone else's stuff around us, and it might not be to our taste. What if it's not as clean as we'd like? What if we get one of those nightmare hosts that you hear about?
And sure enough, we've had all those problems and more.
Now, the first issue that we ran into was the most common, and that's lots and lots of clutter. Now, usually this is something that you can't really see when you look at the listings. Most hosts do tidy up for the photos, but then you arrive and there's stuff everywhere. Now, the apartment we stayed in last spring is the perfect example. From the photos, it looks like a really nice space. And it was nice, except for being jam-packed full of stuff. Every cupboard, every drawer, every surface, even under the bed was just full. Books, magazines, bric-a-brac of all kinds. Now, some of it was useful, like a cupboard bursting full of linens and enough cleaning supplies for the next decade. But mostly it was just stuff that was taking up the space that we wanted to use. I mean, that Airbnb was being used as both a rental unit and a storage space.
But at least that place was all clean and cared for. The next big issue that we've run into is when the apartment is much shabbier than the photos. Our recent apartment in Istanbul got top marks for this one. We picked it because it was modern and stylish, and it's actually an Airbnb Plus property, so it's supposed to be a higher standard, and we definitely paid a premium for it. We were shocked when we arrived. Here's what we discovered. The Murphy bed was broken. The sheets had marks on them. The sofa and the mattress were stained, the shower was mildewy, half the light bulbs were out, and there just weren't enough plates and bowls to go around. It was a disappointment to say the least. Fortunately, the host was very responsive and almost all the issues were addressed within a week, but that is actually a whole week out of our month-long stay. We find that an apartment being kind of run down this way is a very common issue when the host doesn't live in the same city. Instead, they're relying on cleaners, and those cleaners don't necessarily have the same sense of ownership, and they just don't take responsibility for the space. Of course, that's the apartment as a whole. For us, there is one room that's really important, and that's the kitchen. If the kitchen is in bad shape, it just affects our whole experience. We love cooking for ourselves, and we like to do it in a really nice, clean kitchen, just like when we were living at home.
Every time we go into a new Airbnb, we dread going into the kitchen. We never know what we're gonna find once we start opening those cupboards. So the place we're staying at here in Toronto is a very good example of this. When we got here, we discovered the fridge and cupboards were filled with open food. Of course, we appreciate it when our hosts leave us little food gifts or cooking essentials, but this was something else. There were freezer-burned chicken wings, sticky bottles of sauce, and all kinds of other food that the previous guests had left behind. Also, all the cookware and the dishware were mismatched and in poor condition. So all these things make it really hard to settle into a kitchen and do all the cooking that we like to do. In the end, we spent at least an hour clearing all the old food and reorganizing the cupboards, which is not what you want to be doing when you arrive in a new place.
Of course, we've definitely learned a lot from our mistakes over the past couple of years. As soon as we started traveling full time, we realized that our budget of $1,200 a month was just way too low. At that amount, we were getting some pretty rundown apartments. So now we're at a budget of $1,800 and we're willing to pay even more as needed. We've also learned to really deep dive into those guest reviews. We always used to read the reviews before, but now we study them in detail. Of course, we've also encountered some issues that make us question whether we should be continuing with this lifestyle at all. Is it really worth the trouble?
When you've booked a month-long stay and you do have problems, you're really at the mercy of the host. I mean, you can raise complaints with Airbnb, but at the end of the day, it's the host who's going to address your concerns, or not.
This apartment that we had last spring was generally a nice space. However, there was an important issue that really needed some attention from the host, and that was that the kitchen was almost empty. There was hardly any cutlery or dishware or pots and pans. We reached out to the host many times and nothing was done. So we had to just go to the nearest dollar store to fill in the gaps.
But our worst problem with an unresponsive host was at an Airbnb that we never even stayed in. So we had booked a full month at this place in Malta. A few days ahead, we let the host know what time we'd be arriving and asked for the check-in details. And then we waited and we waited.
By 11:30 p.m. the night before our flight, we had no address, no check-in details, and no response from the host. Fortunately, we were able to find a last-minute replacement, although no one got much sleep that night.
With all these bad experiences, you might be wondering if we're ready to give up our nomadic Airbnb lifestyle. Well, not quite yet. For each one of these unfortunate experiences, we've had twice as many great ones. After our fiasco with the first apartment in Malta, we ended up with a very atmospheric loft that was just steps from the beach.
In Athens, we stayed in a gorgeous penthouse apartment with a view across the city.
In Dubrovnik, we had a charming little studio with equally charming hosts who provided free weekly cleaning.
Even here in Toronto, where we have had some bad experiences, we had a beautiful studio apartment in the West End. We loved it so much, we actually ended up staying there twice.
Now, despite any issues, there's really no better way to feel like you're living as a local. And honestly, very few places will ever be perfect. We've learned to be a little more open-minded and try to look for the positive in each situation. We're in Florence, we're in Istanbul, isn't that amazing?
And of course, we still make every effort to get the best place that we can in each city. As you can tell, we've had a lot of trial and error over the past couple of years. By now, we're pretty clear on what makes the best apartment for us. So if you want all the details of what we look for in a really great Airbnb, you can click on the next video right here.